my friends, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and time is going so fast right now because I was thinking about the original Iron Man movie. I was like, man, that is way more than a decade old already. That's crazy. Robert Downey Jr. looks older and everything, but when I watched that movie for the first time, I knew it was riffing on all the normal beats of superhero origin story, and I really liked the way it was riffing on it. It was fun. And as we got toward the end and you're getting to know the Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark character, you're like, this guy's so flamboyant and fun and interesting outside of that Iron Man suit. It's going to be such a bummer that he's going to be cooped up in there and nobody's going to know what's going on. How's that even going to work with this character? He's so proud. He has to have people know who he is. This is going to be frustrating to watch. And then it gets to the end and they're doing the press conference and people are trying to connect the dots and be like, what do you know about the Iron Man project or whatever they said? And he goes to do his little song and dance and his lie and his public denial. And then he kind of gets this little twinkle in his eye and he's like, you know what? The truth is, I am Iron Man. And the whole theater laughed and cheered. It wasn't like anything blew up or there was a car chase or lasers or missiles. It was just the hero owning finally, yeah, I'm the hero. What are you going to do about it? And it was awesome. And Matthew is really structured in a very similar manner in terms of how the hero gradually inches toward coming out so that everybody knows who the hero actually is. In the very beginning of Matthew, you get this prologue, and the prologue points toward something big, something that is the completion of all of history as the original audience would have understood it. All of the stories, all of the big names, all of the rock stars. It looks like the author, Matthew, is saying, hey, if you know these names, then you should be able to piece together what's happening here. This character that this book is going to be about is the completion of all of those names. Now, to you and me, as a modern audience, it might seem like he's being a little bit coy, but to an original audience, Matthew chapter 1 is really going to spell out, like, look, this guy is the Christ. He's the Messiah. He's the completion of the Old Testament story. But the full knowledge of who he is and what his association with God is, we haven't got to that yet. And so we get this interesting prologue and this interesting birth narrative, and then we get this character that the original audience would have remembered was supposed to come as the forerunner of the real Messiah when the real Messiah showed up, and that's John the Baptist. And John the Baptist does all this baptizing, and then Jesus gets baptized. And then, remember this? In Matthew 3:17, right at the end of the baptism, it says, as soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, this is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. So at the end of the whole prologue narrative, which I guess you could argue happens after his baptism, maybe it extends up into chapter 4 with his temptation, but we're toward the end of the whole mysterious who is this guy prologue. I mean, you literally have a voice from heaven, like in a Monty Python film, with the clouds parting and being like, that is my son. Okay, so that should be enough for people to figure it out. And then you have the devil himself suggesting that Jesus is the Son of God. And then after the Sermon on the Mount, as we discussed yesterday, another bad guy, that being the demons that Jesus encounters at the end of Matthew chapter 8, they say, what do you want with us, Son of God? So we've got God saying Jesus is the Son of God. We have Satan suggesting Jesus is the Son of God, though that didn't happen in front of everybody. So maybe to the original audience or to the people who were there trying to figure out who Jesus was, maybe that doesn't count, but I'm still listing it. Then you've got demons suggesting that Jesus is the Son of God. And then again, as we discussed yesterday in chapter 9, you have the religious leaders who are Jesus' enemies being like, what? You can't be forgiving people. That's something that only God can do. And it's like, well, actually, maybe you're onto something. But from a storytelling perspective, there's really two ways to do the origin story. One is just to start with, look at this amazing power and look at what we got here. And everybody knows all along exactly what all the powers are that this character has. But there's another way to do the origin story, which is it is gradually spelled out. It's gradually unveiled a little bit at a time as to who you're actually dealing with here and what the extent of their standing or their power actually is. And Matthew chooses this route. Well, I guess I should say Jesus chooses this route because he's really coy about exactly what's going on and exactly who he is. We've got all of this language that references back to stuff in Isaiah about things being hidden from people and eyes being opened or eyes even being shut. Some people are getting it, some people aren't getting it. But the second you start to read the text and you're like, Jesus just should have told people. He should have come out at the beginning and been like, guys, I know there's all this hand-wringing and concern about who I am. Well, it turns out that who I am is the Son of God. And then everybody would have followed him and everybody would have been excited and they would have been like, what, the Son of God? Why wouldn't someone follow someone who says they're the Son of God? Like, that's obviously real and true and awesome, and everything would have been great and everybody would have signed up and there would have been no friction. But then you read the rest of the book of Matthew and you're like, oh, dang, look at how people did respond when he did fully disclose or begin to disclose who he is and what he was claiming his relationship with the Father is. Look at how people began to respond, even at the hint or the suggestion that Jesus might actually be God in the flesh or the Son of God or both, whatever that means. Even hinting at the use of the term Son of Man, that reference back to Daniel 7 that we talked about a few weeks ago, agitated people quite a bit. So when Jesus has his Iron Man moment here in Matthew chapter 11 and verse 27, it's a huge deal. All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Now, look, this is going to take a couple of days to unpack, even though it's one little verse that just sounds very Christian-y. But from a narrative perspective, I think the biggest thing that we need to take from this is how shocking this disclosure would have been. Now, surely when he said this, there were some people who were like, I told you that's who he was. I knew it. I think about it, the baptism, and then what the demons said, and then what he said that Satan said. I told you, he's the Son of God. He's God in the flesh. He's the Messiah. He's more than we thought. Other people's jaw would have hit the floor like, whoa, what are you saying? Other people would have done that thing that we all do where we're not offended, but we know other people theoretically are offended. So we're like vicariously offended, and we're like, you can't say that. You just can't say that. But we're not saying you can't say that because it actually bothers us or we think it's bad. We're saying that because we know people are going to freak out and lose their crap and go break stuff if you say that thing. And so surely there were people there who heard Jesus liken himself to the Father here, a likening we will explore much more tomorrow. And their response was to say, whoa, dude, I'm rooting for you. You seem cool. You do miracles. I would like for you to even be the Messiah. That would be awesome. Your followers, I don't have a problem with them doing Sabbath stuff different or not fasting. I think John the Baptist is great. I am really hoping this thing has staying power and gets some momentum. I loved your Sermon on the Mount and all of your Beatitudes, but bro, you cannot be saying stuff like this. Those guys over there, the ones in the robes, they are going to lose it. Literally, they will murder you for saying stuff like that, Jesus. You got to dial that down. You got to walk that back right now. You need to offer clarifying remarks. You need to do a real contrite press conference where you're like, hey, it has come to my attention that some of my remarks yesterday in the heat of competition and the passion of the moment regarding my personhood and deity and my relationship with the God we all know and love, those remarks were not well thought through. They were out of line, and I did not realize when I was saying that the degree of hurt and offense that was going to cause, and I am so genuinely sorry, and I hope you can forgive me for what I said that was wrong. Jesus, you need to roll out some kind of apology like that immediately. We need to do damage control. So for me, it's really fun to picture what the social dynamic was as Jesus drops this. Some people are hyped, like, it's awesome, I knew it. Some people are vicariously very concerned about how upset that's going to make other people, and that vicarious concern is an amazing set of boundaries that we put on our thinking, by the way. And then you got other people who actually are freaking out and actually are mortally upset. And we see in the very next chapter that meltdown is strategic, but it is happening. The ratcheting tension is occurring at this moment, and we're going down a road that we're not going to come back from in terms of the conflict here. But the bottom line is, no matter how somebody responded in the moment, it sure looks like Jesus is saying that he and the Father are one, and that if you know him, you know the Father. And if you know the Father, you know him. If you've seen one, you've seen the other. And that there is a unique relationship here as Father and Son, not just a generic sense of like, Father God, would you please be with my friends Bob and Terry as they're traveling, give them traveling mercies. Like we might all use that language, but Jesus is using exclusive language. And we need to break down that language and look at some of the historical controversies about this passage in terms of its history, its interpretation, the text. And then we just need to consider, what did he mean and what do we do with that? So don't be surprised if we've got a couple more days ahead of us on this I am Iron Man moment that we're getting from Jesus right here. It is a gigantic deal that changes everything and has massive theological implications, as well as massive implications for how we read the rest of this document. I'm having fun. I hope you are as well. Giant high five and thank you to everybody who is supporting the program at patreon.com/the TMBH podcast. Again, just cannot stress enough, this happens because you all do that, and it makes a world of difference for me and my family and my time and just ability to think about this and connect together every day, which I love doing. So seriously, thanks a ton. Thanks to all of you who are here hanging out. More on this whole I and the Father in one bombshell Iron Man moment from Jesus mañana. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.